My beloved child, something happened last night that you were never supposed to ignore. Before you continue, stop for a moment and listen carefully, because this message may reach you at exactly the moment you need it most. There is a reason you found these words today, and there is a reason your heart may have felt unusually restless, heavy, or strangely hopeful without knowing why. Last night, something shifted in the emotional world surrounding you. Someone you have a deep connection with, someone whose presence seems to reach you even when they are far away, experienced a moment they could not easily explain. They may have awakened suddenly, stared into the darkness, remembered your face, heard a song that reminded them of you, or felt an unexpected wave of emotion that seemed to come from nowhere. And here is where this becomes important: they were not simply remembering you casually. Something inside them was pushing them toward a realization they had been avoiding for a long time. They realized that there is something they need to tell you, something they have kept hidden behind silence, distance, hesitation, pride, or fear. Please do not scroll away now. Don't skip this part, because the smallest detail in this message may suddenly make sense of something that has been confusing you for weeks, months, or perhaps much longer. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. And the reason I am asking you to remain here is not to create fear or false excitement, but because the story unfolding around this connection has layers, and the most important layer has not yet been revealed. Last night may have been the moment when your soulmate finally admitted something to themselves that they had been too afraid to admit before. They still care more deeply than they have ever allowed you to see. They may have tried to convince themselves that they were moving forward, that they were unaffected, that they could remain silent, that time would make the feeling disappear. But something happened that broke through that carefully constructed distance. Maybe it was a memory. Maybe it was a familiar place. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe it was simply the quiet of the night when there were no distractions left to hide behind. And in that quiet, they felt the truth. They realized that some connections cannot be erased simply because communication stops. Some emotions do not disappear because people pretend they are gone. Some memories become stronger when everything else becomes silent. This is why you may have felt a strange pull recently, as though something was unfinished. You may have noticed yourself thinking about them at unusual times, remembering conversations you had forgotten, wondering what they are doing, or suddenly feeling emotional without an obvious reason. You may have even asked yourself whether you were imagining the connection. But tonight, listen closely, because the message is not about chasing someone, forcing an outcome, or waiting desperately for another person to change. It is about understanding what may have happened inside their heart when they were finally alone with their own thoughts. They saw something clearly. They recognized that the person they had been trying not to think about was still the person their heart kept returning to. And perhaps the most surprising part is this: they may have realized that losing the connection would hurt more than admitting the truth. That realization can change everything. so don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because there is a specific reason. This message begins with what happened last night, and when you hear what they discovered in that moment, you may finally understand why the energy between you has felt so different lately. There is another layer to what happened, and this is where the story becomes much more emotional than you may expect. Imagine someone sitting alone after an ordinary day, believing they have everything under control. They have answered messages, completed responsibilities, smiled when necessary, and carried on as though nothing inside them has changed. Then suddenly, in one quiet moment, an old memory rises to the surface. Not a random memory, but one connected to you. Perhaps it is the sound of your voice. Perhaps it is the way you looked at them when you knew they were hiding something. Perhaps it is a simple moment that seemed insignificant at the time but became unforgettable afterward. They remember it with unusual clarity, and for the first time they understand why it stayed with them. That is what may have happened last night. They realized that the moments they dismissed as ordinary were actually the moments that made the connection meaningful. And this realization can be overwhelming because it forces a person to confront a truth they have been avoiding. They may have remembered the times they could have been more honest with you but chose silence. They may have remembered words they wanted to say but never said. They may have remembered an opportunity they allowed to pass because they were uncertain, afraid, confused, or simply not ready. And suddenly, the past looked different. They began asking themselves questions they could no longer silence. Why did I pull away? Why did I pretend I did not care? Why did I wait? Why did I allow distance to grow? Why did I think there would always be another chance? And perhaps the most painful question of all was, what if I have already lost the person I was meant to value? That question can keep someone awake. It can make the heart feel heavy. It can turn an ordinary night into a moment of deep reflection. This is why you should not skip. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you, and the deeper message has not even arrived yet. There is a possibility that your soulmate has been carrying a secret, not a secret meant to frighten you, but a truth about their emotions that they were not ready to reveal. They may have hidden how much your absence affected them. They may have hidden how often they think about you. They may have hidden the fact that they compare new experiences with memories of you and quietly realize that something is missing. They may have even hidden from themselves how deeply they wanted another chance to speak honestly. The strange thing about emotions is that they can be ignored during the day because life is loud. But at night, when everything becomes quiet, the truth often becomes louder. And last night, their truth may have become impossible to ignore. They may have realized that what they called confusion was actually fear. What they called distance was actually self-protection. What they called moving on may have been an attempt to avoid admitting that they were still emotionally connected to you. They may have finally understood that their silence did not erase the bond, it only created unanswered questions. And now one thought may be repeating in their mind: what if they still care too? That single question could be the beginning of something completely unexpected. Do not rush past this. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because there is a reason the message reached you now rather than weeks ago, and the next part may explain what their heart was actually trying to communicate beneath all that silence. Now listen to this carefully, because this is the moment where many people misunderstand what is happening. When someone has genuine feelings but does not know how to express them, their behavior can become confusing. They may come closer and then create distance. They may appear interested and then suddenly become quiet. They may watch from afar instead of speaking directly. They may want to know how you are doing without wanting you to know that they are asking. They may replay conversations in their mind and wonder whether they said too much or too little. They may write something and delete it. They may open a conversation, stare at your name, and then close it without sending anything. They may tell themselves that they should wait for the right moment, while secretly fearing that the right moment has already passed. If this sounds familiar, understand something important. Silence does not always mean absence of feeling. Sometimes silence is where a person hides the feelings they are not brave enough to confront. Last night, your soulmate may have reached one of those moments. They may have realized that pretending everything is fine has become harder than admitting that something inside them still needs resolution. And perhaps they asked themselves whether you would even listen if they finally told you the truth. Would you believe them? Would you forgive them? Would you understand why they acted the way they did? Would you still see the person behind their mistakes? Those questions can create an emotional storm inside someone. They want to speak, but they fear the consequences of speaking. They want closeness, but they fear rejection. They want to explain themselves, but they know explanations cannot always erase the pain caused by silence. And there is something else they may have realized last night: they cannot control how you feel, but they can finally control whether they continue hiding how they feel. That distinction is powerful. It means their next step may not be about forcing you into anything. It may simply be about becoming honest. And honesty can arrive in surprising ways. It might begin with a small message, a simple question, a reference to an old memory, a sudden appearance after a long period of silence. A sentence that seems ordinary but carries an emotional meaning underneath it. You may hear something as simple as "How have you been?" and not realize how much courage it took for them to send those words. You may receive a message that appears casual, but behind it could be challenged, encouraged, or simply allowed to be themselves. Perhaps you made them feel safe enough to speak about things they had never shared with anyone else. Perhaps you noticed details that others ignored. Perhaps you understood their silence without demanding an explanation. Perhaps you brought out a softer side of them that they rarely showed. And now, after distance has entered the picture, they may have realized that the connection was not ordinary because of how deeply it affected them. Last night, they may have remembered a moment when they felt completely understood by you, and that memory may have created a painful comparison with everything that came afterward. They may have realized that they were not simply attached to your presence, they were attached to the peace, honesty, and emotional recognition they experienced around you. This can explain why someone sometimes appears to move forward while still carrying an invisible connection to the past. They can change routines. They can meet new people. They can become busy. They can fill their schedule. They can convince everyone around them that they are perfectly fine. But when the world becomes quiet, the emotional truth remains. And last night, that truth may have spoken loudly. Perhaps they finally admitted, "I never really stopped caring." Perhaps they admitted that the distance was not what they wanted. Perhaps they realized they had been waiting for you to make the first move because they were too afraid to risk hearing that you had moved on. That fear can become enormous when someone believes they may have only one chance to repair something meaningful. And here is the part you must remember: if this person truly wants to return to your life, their actions will eventually need to match their feelings. You do not have to chase them. You do not have to prove your worth. You do not have to spend every night wondering when they will appear. Your value does not depend on whether another person recognizes it quickly. But perhaps something is changing because they are beginning to recognize it themselves. They may have realized that you were never asking them to be perfect. You were asking them to be real. You did not need endless promises. You needed honesty. You did not need dramatic words. You needed consistency. You did not need someone to say they cared while behaving as though they did not. You needed their actions to make their feelings believable. And that realization may be exactly what happened last night. They may have understood that if they ever come back into your life, they cannot return with the same hesitation, the same confusion, or the same half-truths. They would have to come differently. They would have to speak differently. They would have to show you that they finally understand what they nearly lost. So don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because the next revelation is about the secret they may have been carrying all this time, and it is not the secret you are expecting. Here is what may surprise you most: the secret may not be that they stopped loving you. The secret may be that they were afraid they were not enough for you. Somewhere beneath their silence, there may have been an insecurity they never knew how to explain. They may have looked at you and believed you deserved someone more confident, more stable, more expressive, more prepared, or more certain. Instead of admitting that insecurity, they created distance. Instead of saying, "I am afraid I will disappoint you," they became quiet. Instead of saying, "I do not know how to handle how strongly I feel," they acted as though they did not care. And perhaps you interpreted that behavior as rejection. They may now realize that this misunderstanding cost both of you precious time. Last night, they may have confronted the possibility that their attempt to protect themselves actually created the very outcome they feared. They were afraid of losing you, so they pulled away. They pulled away, and the distance made you question their feelings. You questioned their feelings, and they became even more afraid to approach you. A cycle formed. Neither person knew how to break it. But something may have changed last night because they finally saw the pattern. They realized that fear had been making decisions for them. And when fear makes decisions, people often lose opportunities that courage could have protected. This is why the message feels urgent. Not because you should panic, but because there are moments in life when emotional clarity arrives suddenly. A person can spend months avoiding one truth and then understand it in one night. They can wake up and realize that the person they thought they had forgotten is still present in the deepest corners of their thoughts. They can realize that they are tired of pretending. They can realize that they do not want another year of wondering what could have happened if they had simply been honest. That kind of realization changes the way someone looks at the future. And if they are truly experiencing it, you may notice a shift. Their communication may become more direct. Their hesitation may become smaller. Their attempts to reconnect may become more consistent. They may begin asking questions they once avoided. They may finally speak about the past instead of pretending it never happened. They may tell you something they have never told you before. And when that moment comes, listen not only to the words but to the intention behind them. Because sometimes the most powerful confession is not "I miss you." Sometimes it is "I finally understand what I did." That sentence carries accountability. It means someone is no longer only thinking about what they want, they are thinking about what they may have caused. That is a completely different level of emotional awareness. So don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. The message is moving toward the moment when the hidden truth becomes impossible to hide, and when that happens, you may suddenly understand why your soulmate's energy has felt different. There was another moment last night that may matter more than everything else. They imagined what their life would feel like if you were truly gone from it. Not temporarily distant. Not waiting. Not somewhere in the background. Completely gone. That thought may have frightened them because they realized they had been treating your presence as though it would always be available. Sometimes people only understand the value of a connection when they imagine its permanent absence. They may have pictured a future in which they never hear your voice again, never see your expression, never have another meaningful conversation, never get the opportunity to explain themselves, and never discover whether you could have built something beautiful together. And suddenly, the future looked different. It may have felt emptier than they expected. That realization can cause a person to stop and reconsider everything. They may have wondered whether pride was worth the distance, whether fear was worth the silence, whether waiting for the perfect moment was worth risking a connection that might never return. And this is where the title of this message becomes important. Something happened last night because something inside them may have finally reached a breaking point, not a dangerous breaking point, but an emotional one, the moment when avoidance stops working. They may have cried. They may have become deeply emotional. They may have sat quietly with memories they had avoided for a long time. They may have admitted to themselves that they are not as unaffected as they wanted to appear. And perhaps they realized something that shocked even them. They do not simply want to remember you, they want the opportunity to speak to you again. They want to know whether there is still a possibility of healing what was left unfinished. They want to know whether you still think about them. They want to know whether you ever understood what they were trying to say without saying it. They want to know whether the connection meant as much to you as it meant to them. But there is a complication. They may still be afraid of approaching you because they do not know what they will find on the other side of the silence. Maybe they fear that you have changed. Maybe they fear that you no longer care. Maybe they fear that you have become stronger without them and that there is no place for them anymore. Maybe they fear hearing the one answer they cannot emotionally prepare themselves for. Yet despite that fear, something inside them may be telling them that remaining silent forever would be worse. That is why this moment matters.